A Hermit in the Himalayas by Paul Brunton, Chapter 8. 3.5 weeks have silently slipped by since I penned in my journal the last of these paragraphs, which come so disjointedly from my pen. After all, I did not come here to these primeval forests and snow-covered summits to write, but to rest. If I am to remain faithful to the charge which has been laid upon me, to be still must remain my principal aim. Whether I take up the transparent barrel of pen on some days, or tap the glistening glazed keys of my typewriter on others, or ignore both writing instruments for weeks on end, that need not be a matter to trouble me here, as it might have troubled me in the old days in Europe. The solemn pettiness of worldly existence has disappeared under these trees. I perceive that labor is an excellent thing, and indeed a necessity if one is to justify one's existence. But I perceive also that a time must come when to learn how to be is no less excellent, no less necessary, if one is to obey the supreme law of life. For I have had a sight of the far-off goal. I have seen the wonderful way which stretches to the summit before all men, the way which leads to the kingdom of heaven, about which Jesus spoke, and to the peace of nirvana, which Buddha described. We may resist its oncoming for 100,000 years, if we will, because amid all the tribulations and exaltations of daily living, we prefer the delights of material sense existence. We may resent the intrusion of those prophets who voice its gospel, because they throw the icy water of doubt upon our comfortable orthodoxies, which feed us with illusions. But the truth remains that nature holds us in her grasp. There is no ultimate escape. On some fated day we shall be called, with all imperiousness that will brook no dispute, to our true home. Let me then not waste all my days in insensate devotion to labor without end. I have earned the right to call a brief halt to this existence of constant toil and uppiling studies. I have burned more midnight oil than most men, and have awakened many a time to greet the cold gray dawn with my bald editorial head lying upon the table amid a mass of papers. It was once my boast that I could toil like a galley slave and eat up work as ravenously as a hungry dog would eat its biscuits. Today, I reject and repel the remunerative tasks which are constantly proffered me. Not that I regard my solitary existence here or my hermitage life in the south as the only sort of existence worth having. On the contrary, I believe in rhythm, in withdrawal only if followed by activity, in solitude only if followed by society, in self-centered development only if social service is its later complement, in spirituality only if nicely balanced by materiality. We should follow Christ's injunction and render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, yet not fail to hold fast to the things that are of God. All those things which make up the best in material life, and which the world well covets: property, home, position, marriage, motor cars, furnishings, and fine clothes, are indeed attractive, but we need not forget our first destination whilst we go off in their quest. Therefore, spiritual retreat is but one episode in my whole life, not a final goal, but just a camp by the wayside. I am here in India neither as a tourist nor resident, but as a wanderer, who might remain fixed for a couple of years or fly off overnight at his whim. In short, I have no settled abode, neither in the wilderness nor in the city. I try to keep my mind cool and my life uncluttered. Nowadays, I have become an idler, useless to society and unprofitable to myself, a do-nothing who merely sits still and endeavors to keep away the waves of invading thought that advance upon him. In short, I possess neither fixed status nor recognized place in this world. I am no longer respectable. Does it matter? In a pocket-sized black-clothed book, which a friend in Bombay has just sent me, I read at random the sentence, which to me is a sane and soothing notion. Quote, "For what is a man profited if he shall gain the whole world and lose his soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul?" End quote. That book bears on its title page the words, "The New Testament." It is really only another way of saying that to estimate a man by his wealth or by his output of work is vulgar. It is not alone that he does for the world. It is not alone what he does for the world that most matters, but what he is in himself. My extract, however, is unfortunate for my friend. She has sent me the book with the especial desire that I read a totally different sentence. On the flyleaf, she has lightly penciled this note. See Acts, chapter 26, verse 24. Accordingly, I turn over the pages and I look up her monetary reference, and I now read, quote, "And as he thus spake for himself, Festus said with a loud voice, Paul, thou art beside thyself. Much learning doth make thee mad." End quote. I think I'll read that sentence again. "And as he thus spake for himself, Festus said with a loud voice, Paul, thou art beside thyself. Much learning doth make thee mad." My correspondent apparently disapproves of my activities, or should I write inactivities. I know from a previous letter that she considers I ought to settle down in some large city like Bombay, whilst I remain in India and become respectable, that is, meet the middle and upper classes, entertain and be entertained, take hold of some active ambition, hold some sort of post and stick to it, and finally do everything that all conventional people ought to do. She thinks it would be more sensible, ergo, to become a gyrating human being, moving to the so-called melody of jazz in an overgrown town. She evidently thinks it's better to look out of one's window on a vista of chimneys, as if Europe, or a vista of flat roofs, as in India, than on the snow-topped peaks and glittering pinnacles which preside over my present abode. She believes that I have isolated myself from reality. If reality consists of the seething cauldron that is a great city, and of the deeds and fears and hates which boil within it, I could do worse than chain my feet to this untainted Himalayan earth, to pass my days in peaceful contentment and refuse to drag them back to the world. But fortunately, I'm not afraid, and I shall return to its centeredless life. But fortunately, I'm not afraid, and I shall return to its centerless life. I have executed a strategic retreat from the world and not abandoned it. It is not that in her mundane eyes a diviner life has no existence, far from it, but that she likes to keep social well-being sainted and set apart. My correspondent might, of course, denounce my stillness as sheer laziness, but I think she understands them better than that. I beg her to remember that the virtue which Europeans and Americans make of hard work arises out of the necessities of their climate, just as the virtue which the Oriental makes out of indolence arises out of the warmth of his climate. Look at any energetic representative of the West who has spent 20 years in India. The change is startling. The one-time apostle of hard work has become practitioner on the path of indolence. The atmosphere has absorbed him. The climate has conquered him, strong muscles and all. But we Westerners have made a referenced fetish out of excess of energy. We have turned industriousness into a little god. Whenever I visit the West, I have to fit myself with a long diary. The longer its pages, the better, for there's one question crops up every hour. What must I do next? Or who must I see next? It's impossible to draw up a chair to a fireside and just sit for an hour. After all, some of us are like biblical fishermen who toiled all night but caught nothing. We must try to amass a little money, but succeed simultaneously in amassing many cares. Everything has its price. 'Tis true, but few things have their value. We have yet to learn the higher prudence. Even Shakespeare is on my side. Has he not written, "There is nothing so becomes a man as modest stillness"? I should like to add a gigantic exclamation mark after those words for the support of England's premier poet, and language's gifted lord is support indeed. It is an intoxicating idea, but I dare not tamper with his work. True, a knowing critic might rise in ill-suppressed fury and point out that I have arrived at this plausible and to me perfect quotation, or misquotation, he might term it, first by decapitating the sentence and then by chopping off its feet. But I would reply that the whole art of quotation is to wring a few opposite words from their context and reject the rest. What have I done but that? Yet I fear that critic would retire annoyed, seething with indignation at my heresies, Shakespearean, spiritual, and otherwise. I could even quote to my correspondent from the book which he holds in such respect a further statement. Quote, "Consider the lilies of the field. They toil not, neither do they spin." End quote. The result of my consideration is this incursion into Himalaya, but she will adjure me to descend from these metaphysical clouds and perceive the real world around us. To tell the truth, I have made no great renunciation in fleeing to my idle retreat. I am not indifferent to social pleasures, but I can do without them. I'm not afraid to sit lazily upon a mountainside and gaze upon the stage below. We must worship at the feet of the goddess of wisdom in utter loneliness if we would win her, although I've always enjoyed sipping tea at Florian's in Venice or watching the passing crowd beneath a cafe awning in France. These places are not necessary to my existence. Nature, however, is. I may leave her for a time, but always I must return like an erring yet loving husband. Nor can I resist a final quotation which sticks in my memory like a leech. Quote, "Someone should teach that while, in the opinion of society, contemplation is the gravest sin of which any citizen can be guilty, in the opinion of the highest culture, it is the proper occupation of man." Let me read that again. Someone should teach that while, in the opinion of society, contemplation is the gravest sin of which any citizen can be guilty, in the opinion of the highest culture, It is the proper occupation of man. I am glad to accept Wilde's suggestion and so adopt the tutorial role. The artist who wants to paint a really fine, inspired picture, and the musician who aspires to create a symphony which shall bear the authentic mark of genius must go away or shut themselves up behind closed doors until they have finished their work. At such a time, the creative artist who hopes to be something more than a mere mediocrity in his profession permits the world to come in quest of him, or himself goes in quest of the world at his own peril. He must respect the sanctity of his own self no less than that of any house of worship. Solitude preserves and fosters the efforts of his genius, but society destroys them. Genius, indeed, must labor in spiritual, artistic, and physical isolation. It must be selective and taken no more from the world than it needs. Now, let me start that sentence again. It must be selective and take no more from the world than it needs to help its prime purpose. People who lead commonplace lives may laugh at its eccentricities, but they produce nothing extraordinary. In just the same way, when a man hopes to make a supreme endeavor to spiritualize himself, he must go away and shut himself up too. Is he not also an artist, albeit his art shall be intangible, yet ineffable in its results? In just the same way, too, if my own dream calls me here to Himalaya and bids me to sit still, surely life may have some use for that also. Am I to assume that other people understand my business better than my master and my overself? No, my dear lady, I prefer to be true to myself and not attempt to counterfeit others. Both you and I should not yield in fear to common custom or public error, but rather obey the highest law of our being. We need not be afraid. We shall lose nothing. No, not one iota. The divine laws will take care of us if we trust them, and all apparent loss will be but temporary and made good with compound interest. Let us trust the mathematical rightness of the unseen justice. It shall not betray us. There remains, lastly, a higher reason for my attitude. Some years ago, whilst plunged in a yoga trance of profound meditation, I received a message, perhaps even a mission, but certainly a work to be done. This message came from 4 great beings, angelic figures of an order particularly interested in the spiritual welfare of humanity in the mass, who have come close to this earth sphere from another planet. In obedience to this message, wherein I was bidden to become for a while a wanderer upon the face of the earth, I flit from place to place as the Spirit moves me. I did not care then, and I do not care now, for public rewards. Fame and renown leave me quite cold, and are therefore unwanted. Money I require no more than sufficient to live a decent existence amid decent surroundings, and to meet the exigencies of the travels imposed upon me. Pleasure I like to sample in small doses at odd intervals only. Although I accepted the task, I refused its public side, preferring to let others do that part, which was likely to bring them public rewards. It is more to my temperament to accomplish the fundamental basis of this task in quiet and secrecy. Literary work is but a side issue with me, and as for the reserves, I have always the sense of divine providence backing me. I need no other. The dear lady has marked the paragraph which she considers pertinent to my case. Such a reference, coming from any other person, might well seem offensive, but she is a friend and takes a friendly license. Moreover, as the elderly widow of an army colonel, and knowing some of my most intimate and personal affairs, she takes a maternal interest in them. I accept her reference, then, without the slightest offense, indeed with a laugh, for I know she has marked that paragraph out of affection, not contempt. It is curious, nevertheless, what peculiar definitions people place upon the word sanity. A few months ago, I delivered an address before a certain Indian university, not wishing to stray aside from my studies, which had been the mainstay of the students, yet not caring to take the long journey of 160 miles, merely to tell them something that did not engage my own deepest interest. I found a happy medium by delivering a lecture on the theme of the philosophy of inspiration. In that way, I was able to touch on the subject of inspiration in literature, art, business, invention, life, and religion, as well as to provide the students with one or two practical hints on their preparation for a career. After the newspaper reports of my address had been published, a deputation came to see me to suggest my delivering an address in their own state university. Although a still longer journey was involved, and although I rarely do public speaking, rejecting by habit almost all invitations, I replied that I would agree provided an official invitation were sent to me. But when the professors, who were friendly to me, put forward their resolution at the next meeting at the academic council of their university, the head of the council used his influence to reject it. Accordingly, the invitation was not sent. The reason for this opposition was peculiar. The man who opposed my coming was a European, to be precise, an Englishman. But in India nowadays, all whites are called Europeans by an official order. His chief and only objection was that a white man who lives among the natives and who spends his time chiefly among yogis in a hermitage must be mad. If withdrawal from city to country, from activity to retreat, for occasional and limited periods, be an indication of insanity, then I prefer never to become sane again. If seeking metaphysical truth or practicing mystical meditation is a sign of disordered intellect, then I pray the gods never set me right again. If, to this learned but little-minded gentleman, the effort to find and keep inner peace in a peaceless world is an incipient insanity, then I am happy to have him label me as mad. But I look upon it as a true sanity to try and keep a worthwhile integrity of soul amidst all the distracting forces, the terror and turbulence of modern existence. My academic opponent no doubt goes respectably to church every Sunday, but would be willing to talk with Christ. But would he be willing to talk with Christ? To cavalry, I wonder whether he has ever thought that Jesus meant what he said. I wonder whether he could possibly realize that a saintly sage of our times, Hindu-born though he be, is a truer Christian than most of the mob with the Sunday religion. I wonder whether he could ever grasp the fact that a brown skin is no barrier to entry into the kingdom of heaven, which Jesus held before us as the goal, but which so few Christians understand today. I would make every preacher undergo an apprenticeship to life, and not to professors, before he spoke the first word from the pulpit. I would send him as a young man to live with the poor and the downtrodden before he fitted together those polished periods of his maiden sermon. I would compel him to go out to the lonely mountains and the unfrequented woods and stay there without books or friends, to wrestle with his soul in that solitude until he either found God or found that the church was not his vocation. I would bid him renounce all hope of inspiring others with religion until and unless he had first become inspired himself. If in the sequence his sermons might be less to the liking of conventional audiences and conventional bishops, they would at least be true and sincere, palpitant with the divine breath, which ought to enter into every man before he dares to become a minister of God to the godless. This I would require of every preacher and every priest, whether he belong to the Church of Christ or the Brotherhood of Buddha, whether he admonish his flock in the name of Sri Krishna or in the name of any other prophet. I am in the fortunate position of owing allegiance to no orthodox religion. When inquisitive persons ask me what is no business of theirs, I reply disconcertingly, and they do not press their inquiries any further. I have found no mooring for my floating soul in any religious faith, in any philosophy, because I believe in the Spirit, which, like the wind, bloweth where it listeth. People who professedly follow Jesus, but who have never succeeded in understanding or obeying his deepest injunctions, may, in their Pharisaic fervor, naturally resent the intrusion of one who does not outwardly belong to their or any other denomination, a man whose interior wisdom sets up bar and barrier between him and them, might as well as between him and every other creedal group, finds, however, that it also sets him free. If he is strong enough to stand aside from all the orthodox religious and racial groupings surrounding him, and if he is independent enough to court the favor of none, nor to fear their frowns, then destiny and choice have indeed combined to give him a unique and delightful liberation. Whilst other men hurl their silent or vocal hatred at each other, whilst race murmurs against race, while creeds come into contemptuous collisions over trifles, he may regard the foolishness of these quarrelsome folk into whose midst he has been flung as an observer from a distant planet might regard it if he too were flung here. Such a man has no contemporary and does not need to look for one. The orthodox does not welcome such independence, while the heterodox may disdain such superstitions in quotes. It does not matter. It does not matter. Truth, serene and supreme, can wait patiently for her day. She can lose nothing, for she is eternal. Her revelation must come sooner or later, slowly, suddenly or slowly. It is because of this detached position that I can find my friends among all faiths and none, and my enemies in the same wide-thrown groupings too. I live amongst them all as an alien, well knowing where my true native land really is. No institution interposes itself betwixt me and the sacred beams which fall from the hidden sun. Fate has condemned me to become an interpreter of the Sphinx's language, a task delightful enough so long as one keeps one's interpretations to oneself, but disagreeable indeed as soon as one begins to reveal them to a skeptical world. But I find a secret comfort in the thought that this penible sojourn of mine is but a temporary one, and that the relenting gods will one day give me swift passage back to my own star, for whose silvery greenish twinkle I search the sky every night with acute nostalgia. Oh, that's beautiful. Okay, I'm going to read that last sentence again. It's so beautiful. But I find a secret comfort in the thought that this penible sojourn of mine is but a temporary one, and that the relenting gods will one day give me swift passage back to my own star, for whose silvery greenish twinkle I search the sky every night with acute nostalgia. The friend in Bombay, bless her kind but mistaken soul, in attempting to rebuke my addiction to research into matters that lie thickly veiled, however, has done me a real service, all unwittingly. She has put into my hands all bookless as I was, when I came into this solitude, the words and the life of the wise Galilean, whose very name carries ever a magic sound to my ears. I shall read these pages right through. It is true that I can never accept the authorized version of this book as the accurate record of him, nor as the full one, because much that is worthwhile has been rejected by compilers, and much that is printed has been badly translated, while the record of Jesus' wandering preparatory years between the ages of 12 and 30 is entirely missing. Even the true incidents are not always accurately reported. Nevertheless, even imperfect as it stands, I take the little black book to my heart and shall treasure it as a gift. We must look beneath the surface. We must look beneath this surface symbol that men call life, my dear lady, and endeavor to find out what it truly means. Jesus knew. We must not mistake the mere accidents of existence for its fundamentals. He who apes the world at the cost of his interior peace punishes himself. The words of Jesus have not been entirely lost to the world, as the words of so many other speakers have. Why? Because Jesus spoke out of the deep region of the over-self, whereas the others lectured out of their little intellects. Jesus spoke to his contemporaries, but his speech succeeded in reaching all posterity. The others could never get beyond their contemporaries, never find more than an ephemeral life in the Daily Gazette. They had to speak with some care both for public opinion and their pockets. Their excuse was that men must live, that bread is better than a halo. Poor fellows, they did not know that whoever finds the halo will find his bread likewise. Sparrows are fed, and why not men with halos? God is not so powerless that he cannot take care of his own. The speech of Socrates is also still in circulation because he let the bread take care of itself, which it did. The value of a man's words depends upon his spiritual specific gravity. The sayings of this God-man, Jesus, are the most quotable of any I know. The world of commentators and theologians may quibble over their meanings, just as they have quibbled for 1900 years, but a simple soul or a sensitive one will find far less difficulty in understanding them because they are superbly direct, and because Jesus himself was not a theologian. There is nothing in the New Testament which is tortuous, or hesitant. Tortuous. Okay, I don't know that word. Tortuous, or hesitant. For in this day and age, the time has come, as it came once in Palestine, to speak outright, to give plain voice to truth, and not to mutter half-heard, half-meaningless phrases about it in dark alleys. Alas, that most of us are spiritual mutes and cannot speak one eternal word. Alas to the cry, back to Christianity, which I heard in Europe, or back to Hinduism, which I heard in India, is a vain one. We have had ample time to try these faiths. If we could not experiment with them properly during the centuries near the lifetimes of their inspirers, we never shall. Let us not delude ourselves. There is no such thing as a return to the past. The original inspiration of any religion is also its most vital one. Much can be done under its influence which later can only be copied, without heart and without fire. The wheels of the clock cannot work reversely. Do what we may. The past must now take care of itself. This is precisely what Jesus meant when he said, "Let the dead bury the dead." We must study life in the present living. Now, we must study life in the living present, not in the dead past. The world is still waiting for its Redeemer. The old religions have lost their dynamic. The real Christians are those who were flung as martyrs to the lions. Let us start our learning of the truth clear from objective vestiges of mummified dogmas. If the oracles of ancient civilization are now all but silent, then the oracles of the modern world must speak their word. Inspiration itself does not lie in the grave, even though its earlier instruments do. If Christ came to Camden Town as Blake in the beauty of his spiritual understanding, supposed he might, no one would recognize him, for the simple reason that our false education would lead us to expect a descent of flaming chariots from the open sky, or else a radiant mist-like figure seen as in a dream, whereas he would most likely be found walking quietly along the high street with few marks on his face to distinguish him from other carpenters walking that undistinguished street in an undistinguished neighborhood. No one nowadays dreams of calling Jesus mad, yet when he first moved and preached among the babbling crowd of bearded Pharisees, the latter murmured scornfully among themselves, "Thou madman." It was not until later, when they saw that he indeed meant what he said, and cast out them that sold and bought in the temple, and overthrew the tables of the money changers, that they took him seriously. Then, when he had become a menace to their own positions and to their own grip upon the masses, they sought how they might destroy him, for they feared him because all the people was astonished at his doctrine. They were afraid as ever to wake up from their miserable illusions. They preferred prejudice to principle and pride to truth. They would flee the overself, for they feared it would bring them loss. Foolish, wicked people. There was nothing to be lost, but all to be gained. Alas, for Jesus himself testified that a prophet hath no honor in his own country. Therefore he left Judea and departed into Galilee, and he must needs go through Samaria. Now Jacob's well was there. Jesus, therefore, being wearied with his journey, sat thus on the well. There cometh a woman of Samaria to draw water. Jesus said unto her, Give me a drink. Then saith the woman unto him, How is it that thou, being a Jew, askest drink of me, which I am a woman of Samaria? For the Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans. Jesus answered, and he said unto her, If thou knewest the gift of God, and who it is that saith to thee, Give me to drink, thou wouldst have asked of him, and he would have given thee drink living water. The woman saith unto him, Sir, thou hast nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. From whence then hast thou that living water? Jesus answered, and he said unto her, Whosoever drinketh of this water shall thirst again, but whoever drinketh of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst. But the water that I shall give him shall be in a well of water springing up into everlasting life. The woman saith unto him, Sir, I perceive that thou art a prophet. Jesus saith unto her, Woman, believe me, the hour has cometh, and now is, when true worshippers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for the Father seeketh much to worship him. God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship in spirit and in truth. Veni, vidi, vici. The Roman leader's words do not apply to Jesus. He conquered the hearts of a few, it is true, but the mass of Jews remained unregenerate. He himself passed away as obscurely as he had come into the midst. Biased theological historians, notwithstanding, so obscurely that hardly a single written reference to him of that time exists today. Nevertheless, quote, in the meanwhile, his disciples prayed him, saying, Master, eat. But he said unto them, I have meat to eat that ye know not of. Therefore said the disciples to one another, Hath any man brought him anything to eat? Jesus said unto them, My meat is to do the will of him that sent me, and to finish his work. End quote. Skeptics who find it hard to believe that Jesus lived may be pardoned, but intellectual mystics who would turn all Bibles into mere allegories and all past religious teachers into symbols of human venture too far into speculation. Why should there not have been such great men who discovered their inward godhood? And if they once lived, why should their stories not have been written down, however faultily? Christ and Krishna, Buddha and Osiris are no more myth-like figures than Muhammad, who, being so much nearer to our own time, has his existence accepted without question. The real difficulty lies in the embroidered interpolations to these sacred histories. The extraordinary quality about Christ is his power of conversion. He walks by the Sea of Galilee, finds two fishermen engaged in their daily work, throws out a few words, and straightway induces them to cast a different kind of net amongst men. The son goes out to look for his father, herd of asses, to look for his father's herd of asses, meets the master and is changed. Henceforth he too shall go out to look for a diviner herd. Saul, journeying along the road to Damascus, is met by the invisible Christ and falls to the ground at his feet. Yet even this power of Jesus was not a miraculous one. It was not universal. He could not convert the Pharisees. He has not converted them yet. Those hard, stiff-necked, formal, overprudent creatures who have existed through all ages and in all lands, not merely among the Jews, but also among other races too, for Jesus could only convert his own. Indeed, he did not seek to do more than that. He had come for them, his children. No man of God can do more than that. Such is the marvelous gift of freedom, which God has bestowed on all of us. No man's mysterious freedom of will shall be disturbed. We are to turn homeward. We are to turn homewards of our own accord, not by any pressure or interference. The masters of light, as in Jesus' day, seek those alone who are already seeking them, who in their conscious or unconscious minds are eager to return home. They know that grapes cannot be gathered off thistles.